Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining the Gwinnett County Public Library's bi-monthly Social Justice Club. My name is Linda Huang, and I'm a librarian at the Five Forks branch. Today, we have a very special guest joining us, Gwinnett SToPP's Executive Director and co-founder Marlyn Tillman. And Gwinnett SToPP stands for Gwinnett Parent Coalition to Dismantle the School to Prison Pipeline. They formed in April 2007 to answer growing frustration with the number of schools relying on harsh punishment and law enforcement to address minor school misconduct. Gwinnett County Public Schools has well over 1,400 children enrolled in alternative schools, and Gwinnett's population has doubled since 1990, while its inmate population has increased 6 times. Gwinnett SToPP formed to lead a parent-driven, community-centered partnership approach to dismantling the school to prison pipeline in Gwinnett County. And today we'll be covering the topic of overcriminalization in schools, and we'll discuss a little bit about the article, Does the Pipeline to Prison Start in School or at the Home? As librarians, we are information specialists here to simply bring you information, not persuade you of anything. Please be respectful of others. And in addition, I want to welcome all perspectives and would like everyone to contribute if they're comfortable doing so. First of all, welcome, Marlyn. If you could just give us a brief explanation of what Gwinnett SToPP is and what they do, and just talk about your organization.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate this opportunity and the chance to work with the library. Social justice, needless to say, is something that's special to me and near and dear to my heart. Helping our communities and keeping us safe and moving forward and thriving is what I do. So I'm going to get into my presentation. So Gwinnett SToPP was formed by 2 parents who came to understand the gravity of the problem in Gwinnett. We later learned that it wasn't just Gwinnett, and we organized parents, students, and community members around dismantling the school to prison pipeline. Let's learn more about what that means.
The school to prison pipeline. It's a term that describes how American kids get pushed out of public schools and into the juvenile and criminal justice systems. Basically, harsh zero-tolerance policies in schools have led to more suspensions, expulsions, and even in-school arrests. In fact, expelled and suspended students are more likely to get held back a grade, end up in juvie, or just drop out altogether. And dropping out of high school makes you 3 times more likely to get arrested. Back in school, forget about hallway monitors. Students these days often have to deal with school police. Minor offenses that might have landed you in the principal's office back in the day can now actually lead to your arrest. Students of color and those with disabilities are disproportionately affected. Black students get expelled 3 times more than their white classmates, while a student with a disability is 2 times more likely to get an out-of-school suspension than everyone else. The Justice Department found that Black students got harsher punishments than their white peers for doing the same things. So maybe it's time our education system got schooled?
So we just heard about what the definition of the school to prison pipeline is, and just kind of briefer summation of that. It is the funneling of children from their regular education setting into alternative education settings and the juvenile and criminal justice systems. It primarily impacts Black and Brown students, students with disabilities, students from low wealth backgrounds, and males. And if you hit each one of these demographics, you're at the highest risk of being in the school to prison pipeline. And so we heard from the video that it is the recharacterization of student behavior. So pushing and shoving becomes battery, swiping headphones is theft and robbery, talking back becomes disorderly conduct. And when you start to recharacterize behavior in more criminal forms as opposed to typical student misbehavior, you start the process of the school to prison pipeline. So how as we said, the recharacterization of student behavior. Unfortunately, this is the environment that a lot of our students are in. This kind of looks, they're walking through that doorway that leads them down that path. And you see the officer there prepared to wand them. One of the things our disciplinary alternative school has is metal detectors. And when students enter, I had a student, I asked him, he didn't know who I was, what I did, except for my name, right? And I asked him, show me what happens when you go into the school. And he pulled out his shirt, he shook it out, he took off his belt, he took off his shoe. And that's the process that they go through every day. They can only have clear backpacks, they can only be but so large. It is truly, and he said to me, I told him we're here to help him have a voice and talk to the principal about, what works there and what doesn't work there. And he said they don't want to listen to us. They're just teaching us how to go to jail. And so students know when you care, okay, and how you're treating them. And so harsh school discipline impacts student achievement. It reinforces inequalities based on race, gender, and education program, and it causes students to be locked out of a quality education. If students aren't in school, they aren't learning. Or one could argue that they are learning just the wrong things. In the US, Black students are suspended and expelled at 2 times the rate of white students. In Georgia, it costs about 8 times more per year to incarcerate a child than to educate them. The carceral system just doesn't work. In 2018-19, Georgia students lost 1.1 million days of instruction due to in and out of school suspension. Gwinnett County students lost about 43,000 days. Comes out to about 200 school years at 180 days per school year. That's too much time. Just 1 out of school suspension in the 9th grade doubles a student's risk of dropping out of school. Black and brown students, as well as students with disabilities, are overrepresented in disciplinary incidents and very much underrepresented in higher level learning opportunities. And I experienced this firsthand with my own sons, who were frequently the only Black or the only Black male student in gifted and AP classes. When we first moved to Gwinnett, my youngest one was a student with disabilities, and he was also gifted, and it's called twice exceptional. And Gwinnett County Schools told me I had to pick a label. Can't have both. And I had to ask them, so where in this federal law that protects his rights, called individual IDEA, that protects his rights, show me in here where it says he has to pick a label. And so you all are going to have to adjust for the disabilities and provide him support. And you're also going to have to help nurture him. I'm happy to say he was in gifted, also kept his IEP, and he thrived, and he's now an engineer. So, how we think about students and what they can do, and when we hang labels on them, what does that really look like, and how does that happen? So this is some more of our work, right? We do our work, I like to say it falls into 2 buckets: public education and advocacy policy change. And on the public education, it's doing things like what I'm doing right now, right? We also run a Parent Leadership Institute, which is a longer-term training program designed just to train advocates. That is its point. We will never have enough advocates to be able to, for everyone who needs one. But what we can do is train community members, train parents to be the advocate in their own community, to be able to assist and support students and families where they live. And that's the goal of Parent Leadership. We also run a Youth Leadership Institute as well. And because we're in the South, that has a different kind of a feel. One of the things I learned in moving here was that children are, the norm is children are seen and not heard. But children have a lot to say. And so our Youth Leadership Institute is a way of helping students find their voice and then be able to advocate for themselves, without hitting the Southern norms of be quiet. You don't have anything to say as a young person. And so it's designed that how do you advocate without, people feeling a certain way about you doing that. We also do various workshops. We were very involved in some of the components that are in the federal education law, the Every Student Succeeds Act. And we do a workshop on training parents and community members about what that is. How do you use that to leverage it to ensure that your students are succeeding and that your school and your community is thriving? Because we train parents that it really isn't just about your one child, it's about everyone, because this is the community. We also do standalone workshops on what is school to prison pipeline, as well as what your student parent handbook didn't really tell you, reading between the lines, because what we learned is this student code of conduct comes home, parents sign off that they got it, but did they really understand what's written there? That became a class because of some of our signature work that we did when it was first formed. And we do a bevy of other things in workshops. I won't go through them all now, but if it's education related, we're doing it in some way or another. Our policy advocacy change, we push for and against policies that impact the school to prison pipeline. And so that's not just student discipline, that's also achievement, because as we started off, if they're not in school, they're not learning. And where do they come back to? The community. Okay, so you need to care about what that looks like. How do they come back? And what are they really getting? And who are you living with, right? You want all students to thrive. And so we do that policy work at our local level. One of the wins I'll lift up is that we got the Gwinnett County schools to eliminate the police contact quota. The police had set a contact quota. They explained it very differently. It was a contact quota. So we got that eliminated. We were also instrumental in getting the student code of conduct denoted for any infraction that could get you an intersection with the law enforcement officer, so that parents and students would know beforehand. It's called due process. They need to know what's wrong and what the consequences are before it happens. And so we did that. We do our work at the state level. We were responsible for getting school climate and student discipline included in the school climate indicator on the state's report card. So that state report card that every school in the state has to do includes student discipline. Unfortunately, this year we had a little bit of a setback in that there was a bill to take the student discipline component out of school climate. We kind of sort of lost the fight, but we got something in return in our advocacy of pushing back and really hitting the legislators hard and getting parents to push back. They decided to put into the bill that every school had to provide their student discipline data on their website. And if anyone asks for it, they have to give it to folks free of charge. So they can't charge you for open records requests. Systems and agencies can charge you, but they can't charge for that. So, we made a little lemonade, not entirely the bill we wanted. And on the federal level, we work with our partners, the National Dignity in Schools campaign, which is a national coalition comprised of over 120 organizations that are grassroots, student parent-led, researchers, legal advocates who come together around creating a positive school climate. And so we work with them, as well as the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, Advancement Project, and many other national organizations to do that national work. And so, as I said, we were instrumental in getting some very positive things in there, like the school climate components, parents' right to know we really push for that one. So parents to be engaged at the table at every step. There's a parent engagement component in the federal education law. So there are now boxes to tick that says, yeah, okay, we're doing it. And of course the devil is in the details of implementation. So it's now federal law. Go push for your involvement at every point of your local schools. You should be there for the school improvement part, their beginning, ending, and middle of the year meetings. Make sure you're in them. And if they're not meaningful, let folks know that, I want it to be more meaningful. I want to get engaged differently. Can we really talk? I would just say officer friendly is a myth. Okay. Nationally, SRO programs began in 1950, and they gained traction in the 90s in response to various school shootings. We all know about Columbine. In 1982, the Georgia legislation gave local school boards the agency to establish school-based law enforcement officers. And in Georgia, a school resource officer is a sworn peace officer. They have arrest, investigation. They are the same as the cop on the street, but their beat is the school. So they have the exact same powers, and they do arrest students, and they do arrest parents. And sometimes it's not for what you would think. It's for things like, I'll put it out there. So in some IEP meetings, which is individualized education program, which has to happen for students with disabilities, there have been cases that because the parent wasn't agreeing and was being passionate in their disagreement and pushing back, they called the SRO to stand in the meeting for an intimidation tactic. That's not what should be going on. And I want to tell you it was only once. And so according to data from the Georgia Peace Officer Standard and Training Council, about 12% of the SROs working in the state's school police departments have been forced out of a previous job, been terminated, or investigated for reasons including chronically poor performance, sexual misconduct, lying to superiors, and inappropriate use of force. Gwinnett County Schools requires police officers that they hire have been out on the street for 5 years before they can be in the schools. Sounds like, okay, we have experience. Yeah, they have experience targeting students and racially profiling. We did, a few years ago, one of our board members did an awareness training on diversity and inclusion. And one of the SROs who works in one of our most diverse schools in Gwinnett, he worked at the middle school level, was pretty agitated during that training. And the facilitator, tried to, just do small chit chat with him and asked, so how's your day going? Not good. And he said, oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. What can we do to help you? Well, I have to be here. He was required to show up at this training. And he goes on throughout the meeting. He said, I'm also irritated that people don't come here and assimilate. People who move to this country should come here and assimilate. And I just sat quietly in the back, stewing with steam coming out of my ears. He's working in one of our most diverse middle schools. That's not acceptable. That's just not acceptable. Gwinnett County Schools spends $10.4 million on police. That's on cars, guns, and our police are packing 2 guns, a taser, handcuffs, and the baton. And they're wearing bulletproof vests. I don't know where they're going with all of that, but they're showing up at our student schools every day dressed like that. Schools should be a place where you feel safe. That doesn't make Black and brown people feel safe. So Gwinnett spends $10.4 million, and that's money that can be reinvested in support services, alternative disciplinary practices that actually help students. Police in schools is not an evidence-based practice. Restorative practices are. Social workers helping students and families, that's an evidence-based practice. Trained counselors who are culturally competent, that's an evidence-based practice. However, we're not spending that money on evidence-based practices. It's like in suspensions, Black students are 2.3 times more likely to receive a referral to law enforcement or be subject to a school-related arrest as white students. And nationally, as I said, this is not just a Gwinnett problem. Nationally, 1.6 million students attend a school with a sworn law enforcement officer, not a school counselor. That states the officer's presence on the campus enhances the perception of safety by students, staff, and the community. And they've decided that we need 96 officers to have this perception of safety, but are they really safe? I would argue that they're not. So we're going to play a game of following the pipeline. You know, we talked about school resource officers and student discipline and what that impact looks like. So let's get into how that is. So everybody familiar with Family Feud? So we're going to play around the Family Feud. So here's our first question. So one state education agency was surveyed, and the top 6 answers are on the board. Name a top reason why Gwinnett students were suspended out of school during the 2018-19 school year.
I'm going to say attendance related.
I was thinking the same thing.
Okay.
Let's see, attendance related. Where is that at?
Okay.
Number 4.
Number 4.
Good job.
Now, Valerie said taking someone else's property. So theft, would that be one of them?
Theft, let's see.
Lennon and Tiffany said student incivility.
Number 1.
Oh, you got number 1. Good job.
Now, so what's that?
That's very broad.
Yes, it is.
Hopefully you'll explain that if you can.
No, I can't, because I wasn't the one who was assigned it. So it is up to how I feel that day, right? Whether you're getting on my nerves, how you're getting on my nerves. It could have been that you really cussed me out. I don't know. You can't tell from that. And actually, the funny story behind this is that, not so funny. We were pushing for the state collects this data, and they collect it in 36 different categories, right? In 36 different categories, at the time, I think it was about 23 categories. And other used to be the largest one all the time. And so we pushed the state to unpack other. And so they came up with other categories that still fall under other, and this is one of them. So they started breaking it out and asking schools, what are you calling this? And they still have this category. So go figure.
So therefore, what do you guys, the rest of you, think about number 5, other discipline incident that's also very vague?
So let's say.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Number
2
2.
most vague.
Right. And these are the top reasons students are being suspended out of school for. Vague, overly broad.
So can I speak to that? When I used to work in the juvenile court, one of the charges that they use, and I used to work in the one in Clayton County, we used to have kids come in for disrupting a public school, which is similar to what you're talking about, like civility. Right.
That is very similar. We've done a little advocacy around that whole disruption of a public school, and that's a state statute. So students get arrested for that.
Yes.
And we've had a principal say to us, we were helping a family, had a principal say, well, he did disrupt the school. I had to leave my office, go down there and see what happened. Isn't that part of your job? I'm not understanding. So is it the behavior we want? No. Should a kid be arrested? No. Okay, so we teach math, we teach reading. We have to teach behavior. We have to teach the behaviors we want. And we aren't going to do that through only punitive measures. So that's, it's a bit much. So anybody want to take a guess at the other ones? So I'm going to give you a hint. One of them, we developed a policy, a recommended policy for Gwinnett County Schools about it, and they've only adopted it in pieces, a section here, a section there, and still not acknowledging that it needs to shift the whole policy. But it is the offense that gets students arrested the most at school.
Tiffany says drugs. Okay. Lennon says threats. Okay.
Nope, that's not even the one about that I was talking about. It's actually the number 3. So I'm gonna tell you, it's not even the horrible stuff that's gonna show up there. It's just not even the really horrible stuff that you would think, oh, well, this has got to be what they're getting put out of school for.
Is it bullying, maybe?
You know what? I take that back. Drugs is up there. So here we go.
Okay, drugs is okay.
Yeah, everybody thinks bullying. So we're going to just turn it over.
Is it weapons?
No.
No. Oh, okay.
It is the number 1 cause of students being arrested at school. We did some advocacy around that as well. The numbers have gone down, but it has not stopped. It was one of the ones we got the number of infractions that could get you arrested or visited by the SRO at school reduced by 33% in Gwinnett County schools. And that was the one. Fighting was one of the ones that the chief and our group did not find agreement on. So, as we do policy advocacy, we sit down with the folks who have control over the policy, right? So we sat down with the chief of police of Gwinnett County Schools, as well as his boss, to go over this and really look into it. So advocacy is just so important. And it's not just, we do the actions where you show up, do the press conference, turn out, all of that. But these one-on-one meetings with the people who hold the power and make these policies is also as important. And our next question is, so let me give a little background on the question. So in Gwinnett County schools, in Georgia schools, every student in the 9th grade takes an end of course test in literature, and they have to take, and if you take Algebra 1, you also take an end of course test. And these are our state tests that have been used to denote where students are in their learning and how schools and districts are doing in teaching. So I just wanted to give you that background. Oh, there are also 4 levels. There's the lowest level that you can score in, which says you're just at the beginning point of getting skills in that. The second level is developing, and that says you're still not where you need to be, but you're getting closer. And then there's proficient, which says you're where you should be. We need you to be right here. And the highest category is distinguished. Well, our state used to use a test called CRT, Criterion Reference Test, maybe. I don't know, CRT. You use the acronym so much you lose sight of what they mean. And so when we learned that cut scores for you to be in that proficient range for CRT was 66%, you had to pass 66% of the test to be considered proficient. Everywhere I went to school, that's an F or a D at the very least. But that was what they had put as their norm. We have not looked into the cut scores for the end of course tests. Probably just don't want to be that disappointed again. So I'm going to say you really want your students scoring in distinguished or as close as possible, because I'd be willing to bet, since they got rid of the graduation test, that they've made the cut score again pretty low. So just wanted to put that out there. So now that we have some background on the question, one state education agency was surveyed, and the top 3 answers are on the board. Name a student demographic that has 15% or more students scoring in the developing range on the 9th grade literature end of course test.
And when you say demographic, are you referring
Ethnicity.
Okay.
Ethnicity, race.
African American or Black?
26.5% of Black students in the 9th grade are not at proficient. It's actually more than that, but they're scoring in developing range. That's not good. We're talking about the basis of being able to read to learn, literature and comprehension.
I would say Hispanic or Latinx.
Number 2, 3.1% of Latinx students are scoring in the developing range. I'm gonna just turn that one over because you're not gonna guess it. You're just not gonna guess it. I kind of cheated in that I said race and ethnicity, but there's another group that's in there. Remember, Gwinnett told me I had to pick a label. I couldn't have both. And so I want everyone has this image when they think of students with disabilities. It's someone who's physically impaired, mentally impaired, all of that. And because there are people who have disabilities who fall into that, but that's the thing that we see, that we think of all the time. But saying you're a person with disabilities is a wide range. And so for the students with disabilities who are taking these tests, I'm going to say the vast majority of them have what we call invisible disabilities, right? Because everybody's looking for that physical, but no, what's going on is in their brain. And so you'll never see that. And they don't get the same grace extended to them. So like ADD kids, ADHD kids, they don't get that same grace because people don't see them as having a disability. But one of the things that happens with an ADHD kid is they don't fully mature till they're about 26. Their brain is informed in that way. And so their frontal lobe, where decision making is done, is the last thing to develop in anyone's brain, right? And for ADHD kids, it's even further down the line. So they make really poor decisions. And so with teenagers, that's why they make poor decisions. Their frontal lobe hasn't fully formed. And so for them, it's like, yeah, that sounds great. And we know that's a horrible idea, right, as adults, but they don't see it that way. And so the students with disabilities in this category are students who have been determined through their IEP process that they are able to take these tests, that they are able to succeed. They should be graduating with regular diplomas, not a special ed diploma. They should be graduating with regular diplomas. It says that they just need supports to get there. And with those kind of numbers, they're not getting the supports that they need to get there. The interesting thing is who's scoring in the distinguished category. So 13.9% of Black students score in the distinguished category. 36.1% of white students score in the distinguished category. 10.3% of Latinx students score in the distinguished category. 42.3% of Asian students score in the distinguished category. The special ed number for scoring in distinguished category, 1.5%. That's pathetic. That's absolutely pathetic, coming from a group that if they were getting supports, they would be doing much better. And they oftentimes don't get all of the supports that they need to be successful. So this is the Georgia pipeline. So this is out of school suspension versus academic achievement. So look at the suspension rates and then look at the end of course test for 9th grade. And this is statewide. And those who are suspended more, if you're not in school, you aren't learning, and they'll have the lower numbers. And so this is out of school suspension and versus Algebra 1 end of course test. And a lot of students are taking the Algebra 1 end of course test in either 8th grade or 9th grade. So I know gifted students tend to take it in 8th grade, and even some take it in 7th grade. The students who are being suspended more are getting the lower scores. And this is on the proficient range. This is who's scoring proficient and what their suspension rates are. And SPED is students with disabilities. So like, can we talk? How do you think these harsh discipline practices impact students and families, parents? When students are suspended, they're home. And for families who don't have flexible jobs or who have multiple jobs, that's a hardship. That creates a hardship. What does the student learn? And keep in mind too, suspensions start as early as pre-K. We are teaching our youngest learners that school is not a place for you. That is not what we should be teaching our students. That's not what they should learn from school. And so students start learning that school isn't for me. I'm not good at this. This child continues on down the path. There's no real support coming, or the support that happens isn't what that student really needs, or enough of it isn't happening. And that leads to our community health, right? Because these students are still coming back home and they're still living at home. And do you want to live around folks who are happy and thriving? Or do you want to live around folks who have been broken through various systemic processes? And not just, and usually the students who are, as I said, one of the categories is coming from low wealth backgrounds. So that's of any race and ethnicity. And so you're trudging along anyway, and then you have the added that happening. So what does that look like? What does that feel like? How do we ensure that students are going to make mistakes, right? There's going to be some mistakes made. How do we ensure that when they make a mistake, that they're not being judged by their last bad mistake, and that there's an opportunity for them to learn from that mistake, understand what they did wrong, face the person that harmed them, and be able to then be restored back into the community and not be judged by that. Who wants to be judged by the last bad mistake they did or the worst thing they did in their life? I don't want anybody bringing it up. If I got past it, I made it good with the person. If I harmed someone, I don't want everybody to keep laying on that if I'm moving on. And as I said, their frontal lobes aren't fully formed. And so we're disciplining them at a rate like they know. And we're treating them like they already know, and they don't. And we have to teach all of that. So there's some strategies to interrupt pipeline. Listen to and meaningfully collaborate with students and parents, foster authentic relationships between students and adults, adopt common sense restorative discipline practices and policies, fund culturally competent school-based mental health professionals and counselors, not just police. This is one thing that came from the National Dignity in Schools campaign. It's their model code. It gives us model policies that can be implemented at the state legal level or even at your local board level. I encourage you to check that out. Of course, join us in this fight. Like, we need help. We always need help. One of the things I want to lift up is, if you know a student that's facing a disciplinary tribunal, have them get in touch with us. We now have access to pro bono legal assistance for students who are going through a tribunal. So we do want you engaging with that and getting the help. Some other resources that are available to you, other organizations who are doing this work. This is the National Week of Action. I'm all dressed up. I have my background, right? So this is the Dignity in Schools National Week of Action. Our theme this year is Community, Not Cops. We believe we should be building communities more and not policing. Police have their place, but they need to be called to be in their place. They shouldn't be right there, right? And we're going to be featured in a book soon. Yay! I'm told the print version has been delayed. But please, you can sign up for this event, learn more about the stories. It is about the movement to dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline by grassroots organizations all over the country. And we are one of the ones featured in Chapter 7. I want to leave you with this. It is doubtful that any child may reasonably be expected to succeed in life if he's denied the opportunity of an education. This is how you contact us. We are on all the social media platforms, some more than others, but we are on all the social media platforms. Please follow us.
Marlyn, I just want to say that was outstanding. I learned so much. It was very eye-opening. I hope our attendees had the same reaction as I did. And the game was actually fun but informative, and I appreciate you making it interactive. If I may just ask a question, Marlyn. So diversion programs and other ways instead of policing, like you said, counseling instead of policing, have there been examples in other counties, other states, even other countries possibly, but it's our country really that has the issue? Are there any examples of successful programs instead of policing that have helped to prevent the school-to-prison pipeline?
So there are some programs that have gotten started. There's some data, not lots. There's more data on like restorative practices. That's operating in Chicago and having a lot of success. It's operating in some of the schools in New York. There's a teacher organization called Teachers Unite, and their whole platform is getting restorative justice in the schools and then implementing it themselves in wherever they're at. So they've had a lot of success. They have some schools that are just whole restorative practice schools. On the policing end, there's Judge Teskey, who is out of Clayton County. He had a mixed thing, and he and I would get into it nicely about he still liked police in schools, but he didn't like them in student discipline. So the police weren't in student discipline in Clayton County schools, but they were still there. So he and I had a difference of opinion. They need to be at the precinct. He thought that, well, they build relationships, they find out about stuff before it happens, da-di-da-di-da. We can call him. But he's been around the country and has a model around how do you put diversion, how do you use, and he said he was able to go around the country for, he's been doing this for a good 10 years. He recently retired, and I just learned now he's doing something else in Denver. But he got the time to go around the country because what he noticed coming into his court, which was juvenile court, was everything coming out of the schools. And he said, it just tied up my day. It was all day long, endlessly. He said, I was getting tired and I'm hearing these stories and there's something else going on. So he convened a meeting of school officials, social workers, all of the court staff, folks who focus on diversion, people in juvenile justice at the state level, and then just locally with the police as well. And some community leaders, and they sat down and came up with, what are we going to do? He said, I'm telling you now, you keep sending them here. I'm not locking anybody up. I'm tired of it. And they came up with a protocol, and it's very well, it's used, it's tried and true. And it does work pretty well in Clayton County. So you really do get the support. You get to hear what happened before the behavior, and then what do you need to get past it. So they do a whole system of care. And he used to post around, faces blurred, but the students who have come through his courtroom to be diverted differently. And he said, because I now got freedom, I can go around the country and show people how to do this. He said, my day is not tied up like it was. He said, I couldn't breathe before. I just couldn't breathe. And so they established a system of care, and it involves all the support systems available through the county, as well as through the state and the school, to really wrap around students and families who are experiencing challenges. Their students may end up referred. And so he said he was seeing less of the kids who just pissed off the teachers and more of the kids who really did something serious. And he was able to help them as well.
That's great. I'm glad there's a movement to help and educate other, like your organization, just to help improve that. So yeah, thank you for that example. I think M. Lachlan had their hand raised.
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry, and I'm driving, so I'm trying to keep my eyes on the road.
Multitask.
Yes, but so I did want to speak to some of what you were saying. And so in Clayton County back in the mid-90s, we started a diversion program for juvenile first offenders using mediation, where if there was an incident, we would have them meet with whoever, for example, if there was a fight at school, we'd have and both children were charged, because that was the sad part of it, is that even if you had a child that was trying to defend themselves, they would still be charged with fighting in a public school, right? So
unfortunately.
Yeah, so we did a mediation diversion program, which was really Judge Tansky got there, but I did want to mention that a lot of schools are doing restorative justice, and they're incorporating restorative justice practices. The main issue is you have teachers that are making the referrals, right? So when a child has an incident at school, the teacher makes the referral to the principal or to the SRO, and that's how they're getting involved in the juvenile justice system. But the main thing is that they're getting involved in the juvenile justice system for some of the behavior is, especially in middle to high schools, is normal teenage behavior, right? So using the restorative justice practices keeps them from having to be referred to juvenile court. Our greatest number of referrals come from teachers in schools. That's true also for DFACs, so children that are referred for child abuse and neglect. Teachers are the number one referrals, and that's also true for juvenile justice coming out of the schools. So if they could train teachers in de-escalation or communication skills or restorative practices, I think that would go a long way.
Absolutely. Gwinnett County Schools is dabbling in it, and that's my characterization. Because one of the things that I've noticed in their dabbling is that a whole lot of schools jumped on board and said, yes, we're doing restorative practices, but it's not really. And the school system has yet to hire real restorative practice practitioners who have been trained and are vested in the field, because it is a field. There's an institute in Pennsylvania that you really go through for a few years to really learn how to do this, and you become certified. And our school system has yet to hire anyone like that. Not hired anyone. They've used a contractor to help do kind of a train-the-trainer model, but they're not sending the right group in to get it first. And they don't, from what I've seen thus far, don't really have a plan on how they're going to fan it through a building. And it does take buy-in from staff. So I'm hoping that, I've had some conversations with them, and I'm hoping that they stop the schools from jumping in and hollering they're doing restorative practices, because that can do more harm than good. And so that does work. That's working in a lot of places around. In fact, Denver is one of the places that was early on in getting it within schools. We are pushing for the redevelopment of student discipline policies, period. We think the policies that they have are strictly about punitive and punishment, and there's nothing in there that is restorative, that says we've done something else before we pushed you out of the classroom, be it in school suspension or out of school suspension. Quite often after school detention is not a tool that's used nearly enough. And so the students end up being punished through their education.
Marlyn, Valerie is asking, what is the name of the group in Pennsylvania, and is it an institute?
It is. It's but yeah, they're actually the International Institute. So it's IIR, and then maybe an A.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it the International Institute of Restorative Practices?
There you go. IIRP.
Yeah.
That is it. That is it. We've had the opportunity to meet with them several years ago. They've done a training in some spaces that we've been in. And it's just really awesome to go through that. But one of the things I quickly learned is that if you aren't vested, if you really haven't been fully trained, you can't take a week-long workshop and come out and say, I'm ready, let's do restorative practices. For our Parent Leadership Institute, we flew someone in to train our parents in just even the beginnings of what it is and how to hold just a peace circle. And they started doing that at the Boys and Girls Club in Norcross. And unfortunately, the director has changed and is not vested in these things now. But the then director was quite vested in it and sent her whole parent board through our Parent Leadership Institute. And so the parents and the staff member, one of the staff members went through the training. She started doing peace circles, and after doing them many times, their students started doing them themselves. When they had a conflict, they were like, all right, well, we gotta have a peace circle. And so when you're doing the right thing, when you see the students implement it and they didn't even get her involved in it, they just went along and did their thing. So that was really, really great.
All right. Well, I guess we will wrap it up there. That was just amazing. So thank you, Marlyn, and thank you everyone for your questions. And if you have any additional questions, Manor has just put some information in the chat. Gwinnett SToPP's website is Gwinnett SToPP.org, and you can contact their organization directly. We do have another Social Justice Club session coming up on December 16th. Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Discussion yet to be determined as far as the topic goes. But feel free to contact us at 770-978-5154. Go through our website. You can contact us that way. If you have any questions or anything specific, please contact Marlyn because she's a wonderful resource. So thank you all so much for coming. And I hope you got something great out of this. I know I did. Everyone have a great night. Thank you.